our town. Dorothy Thompson speaking to you today from City Council chambers here in Richland Center. And this is the chair where the mayor sits. He has a special perspective and he's going to share that with us. And now we'll talk to Mayor Todd Coppernoll about 2024 and looking ahead to what might happen in 2025. And we're here in the office of Mayor Todd Coppernoll, and we're going to take a look at 2024 and 2025. Well, it's the very end of 2024 and almost 2025. What stands out in your mind as most memorable moments of 2024, or maybe milestones that we've reached?
Good question, Dorothy. And first of all, good morning to Dorothy and Ben. 2024 was the year of big elections, right? We had this very divisive, crazy presidential campaign, also the U.S. Senator campaign, which was in our face all the time, very divisive. And that followed our local elections, which took place last April. So we began the year preparing for local elections, then went through into the big ones in November. As you know, the school district had a referendum in there, as did several other neighboring communities. I think the political turmoil of the year is probably what I'll call it and remember going forward. But the city actually did have two major developments that are having positive impact within the year that I'll remember too. The first one was no fun to do. We had a blow up down here in City Hall late spring, early summer. We had a public hearing regarding the future of the Utility Commission. The city attorney had actually made a recommendation that perhaps that should be disbanded. So we called the public in, tell us what you think, and listen to us. And the city council made a decision not to do that. But from that point forward, we had a lot more cooperation in the building. I guess I would say between utility staff, city staff, management, the Utility Commission, and the City Council. I'm proud of all of them because it wasn't easy, it wasn't fun, but what it did is it brought us into rooms together to work on differences and find solutions, which we've done, and that situation is running much more smoothly now. And again, I'm proud of a lot of people because that's not an easy step to take. It wasn't fun, but we did it, and we actually just approved, the Utility Commission just approved a sewer rate decrease.
Wow.
Yeah, how many times have you heard that? But that will take effect at the first of the year here. And just an example of what can be done, you know, when you can just start over a little bit, everybody calm down, talk it through, figure it out. We did. The other one is very recent, just in the last month. We have a new signed developers agreement for Panorama Estates, which that project, the idea came to light back when Paul Corcoran was mayor, and the documents were signed and building one was built when Mike Hoffman was mayor, so this is not a new idea. However, the pandemic caused such a run-up in cost for building materials, building labor, all of it, and then of course interest rates shot up, so the cost to borrow the money to build, and it became prohibitive, cost prohibitive for the builder to complete the project. Building 2, in the terms of the original agreement, should have been renting about a year and a half ago, close to that. And it's not there because the cost just made it impossible to build. A lot of frustration there, a lot of back and forth. But we reached a point now where we feel we actually have a better agreement for the city than the original one. Buildings 2 and 3 will be built simultaneously now. Okay, building 3 wasn't due for several more years. We'll get it years in advance of what the original document had called for. They'll break ground next June. They'll put the first foundation in, and when that's done, which I'm told is about a 2-month build, they'll start building 3, and they'll put them up together, and it's going to bring 92 more apartments to town. Okay, so we've heard over and over again about a housing shortage, which we know is true. This will help alleviate that. This does not mean we won't pursue additional opportunities, single-family houses, maybe duplexes, potentially something that could be a little bit lower rent for senior citizens if we can get it. It's complex. You need a willing builder, available land. You need, if you get state grants or federal grants in there, there's all kinds of rules to follow. It's not a fast process, but we are aware that we need housing at, I would say, different rent levels, different mortgage levels. We know that. But adding 92 apartments to town is a huge win, and also will benefit the tax base, of course, going forward to get those 2 buildings in. And that just happened just in the last few weeks. And that took a lot of time and effort. Again, thank you to Paul Corcoran, Mike Kaufman, multiple city councils, multiple plan commissions, so many utility employees, city employees that worked on this through the 3 different mayors that have had their hands on it. And we should have 92 more apartments renting. I would say giving it June groundbreaking, probably going to be 2026 when they're renting, but they're on the horizon.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So actually that's kind of a nice transition, because the plans you're making now and the milestones and the outlooks are going to bear fruit next year.
Right.
What are you seeing as some of the big goals for the city for next year, or projects? And of course, you know, it may take longer than just 1 year.
Right, and they will. Several of them will. The one that's probably in the forefront, Mike Lamont, and a lot of, I'll just call her Ellen Keller. That's not the right last name anymore, but most people in town know Ellen as Phyllis Keller's daughter. Mike and Ellen are working on a proposed housing development, basically on the back end of Allison Park, up above Rainbow Drive. Land that had been originally owned by the Wheat family, and when Rosalie knew she wasn't going to be with us much longer, she actually sold the land to Mr. Lamont, and I believe it's 12 acres up there. The Wheat family had begun development up there back maybe 15 to 20 years ago, so water is in the ground, the fire hydrants are there, there's power lines overhead, which means it's easy access to get electricity there. However, sewer's not in and there's no street, so there's going to be considerable infrastructure cost. But they do have the land. I think there's 2 lots on Fern out there, and then the rest would be built on a street that doesn't exist yet, up higher. They're very committed to this. They've met with us many times, great attitude. They've done everything we've asked them to do. They're working with an engineering firm right now, because when you build on a hill, you have to consider things like water runoff during heavy rain, because of course there are houses down the hill from there. So things like that have to be mapped out. And so it's a time-consuming process, and there are no guarantees, of course, but at this point, I believe we will get something like 23 new single-family houses out there, and their intent for at least most, if not all of them, is to build what's called 0 step, so no stairs anywhere in the house. Try to make it as easy as you can so that a 2-year-old could live in it or a 92-year-old could live in it, because you don't have steps to climb when you're carrying your groceries in, or just to get around, which I think is fantastic. I love that for the future of the community. There's not much of that kind of housing here right now. I think it's really important, and they get that too, which really made this a fun project to get started on. It's just slower than we want it to be, because there's a lot of detail, and they're important details. Transition from housing, there are some retailers interested in the town, and there's some frustration here, I think, from myself, everybody down in the city, and from the people in town, because they take time, and everybody wants theirs now. I do too. The challenges Richland Center faces over and over again through its history. We were built in a difficult location to build. We are in the hills, surrounded by them, and we've got a river making quite a bit of floodplain. There's areas in town considered floodplain designated by FEMA that I think a lot of people living here don't even realize are floodplain. It just gets hard to build. So when you get an opportunity, flat buildable land, especially if there's infrastructure already there, meaning water, sewer, electric, maybe the street is there, you gotta go. And we know that, and we're trying to do that. There's a hotel chain that has expressed interest, a couple of different retail chains, 3 of them, I'll just leave it at that have expressed interest. 3 of the 4, including the hotel, would want to build a new structure. The 4th one wants to lease an existing structure. They just had difficulty getting a lease done in the location they'd like to be in. We're working on all of them. What I want people to take away from that while we go through the growing pains and the frustration of how to get them finished, where to fit them in and what it costs, is to understand the major shift that's taken place in the last few years. These are stores that were not looking at this community until just the last couple of years. We've pushed that real hard to get their attention, and they've noticed that, and just the culture of Richland Center, not just government, yes government, but not just us down here, that the people in the city want the growth and are ready to be part of it. So we've got their attention, and now it's just how do we get them done. Again, you have to balance. You can't just hit the taxpayers, right? Okay, we're going to give money to this, this, and this, and then property taxes jump. That's not the right answer either. So it's a balance. We've got the right people in the right positions working on it. Hopefully we can get something announced there. Those are the fun ones. They make people excited and happy. Plus it does bring resources to town that we don't currently have.
One thing you mentioned is something people are concerned about at times, and that's our roads and streets.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You probably hear about that.
All the time.
What are the plans that you may be aware of for road and street improvements around town?
That's a great question. I'm going to end with the big one, but I'll start with city streets. So we've spent millions in my time as mayor on city streets. Major street project every single year. And when I say street project, that's kind of a mislabel, a misuse of the term, because we haven't just put pavement down. We've been replacing aged water mains that were breaking every winter. We've been replacing some water pipes that some had lead from days gone by. We put storm sewers in some hilly parts of town that really should have had them from the start. It's expensive, that's why they didn't have it from the start. But we've upgraded infrastructure. Now in other parts of town, and by now it's pretty much every neighborhood has been touched by this, we've done what's known as an overlay, which is an inch of fresh pavement over the top of what's there.
On my street.
Yeah, there you go. We've done dozens of them by now. And that actually started when Mike was down here, Mike Kaufman. I was an older person. I remember the conversation when I first got elected to the council in 19 in the spring. My wife nearly fell on her face stepping in a pothole out on Sunset Lane as we were walking past her childhood home. And I said, what can we do? And I remember older person Travis Wirtz said, shift money from here to here and let's do some overlays. Well, we did that, and every year since we've continued to do that. That's in this year's budget too, the 25 budget, to do more of that. We didn't budget an infrastructure project this year, and the reason we didn't is because in this city budget this year, just like everybody's household budget, inflation run-ups of recent years hit us. And we had to be real careful, again, thinking about the property tax bills. We held the line as tight as we could, and part of the way we did that is to take a 1-year break from an infrastructure project. Doesn't mean they won't come back. It means we wanted to slow down and look before we jump into the next one. Now the big one is Highway 14 East, which I hear about almost every day.
Well, it's sort of like a railroad track.
It's
like
terrible.
But I know that's not really strictly in the city.
It's frustrating because it's a state highway. It's not a city street or a county road. So neither the city nor the county has the ability, meaning the authority, to go down there and just repave that. We can't do that. The State Department of Transportation has to okay that, budget for that, and so on. So the good news is they've done that, and in 2026, so we're going to have one more summer of what we have now. In 26, they're going to redo Bowman Drive to County O. Okay, so all 4 lanes will be completely resurfaced. They'll put in new storm sewers, new guardrails, new lights. I've asked them for an additional set of lights where you leave the Richland Square by where Taco Bell is. They have refused to do that. They've told me that the system they use to basically look to see how many red flags, how many accidents, and they're telling me it's not telling them those are needed, so they're not putting them in. They are, however, going to keep the lights that are there, and maybe beyond the improvement of the surface, which will be replaced, maybe the most significant new thing they're going to do is take all of the islands out, so that entire turning lane will be a turning lane all the way down. Which is important because if you, for instance, if you want to turn to go into the drive-in to go to the Starlight 14, you get backed up right into the lane of traffic now. and a couple of other places down there. We've added traffic through the years since that became a 4-lane in 1987. There's a lot more cars down there, and it's become a bit of a traffic hazard. So they're going to take the islands out. Now that's not going to happen till next year. I like that as much as you like that, but at least they're doing it, and they came out, meaning the DOT came out here and did a public hearing anyone could have attended in the council chambers, and we asked them some pointed questions, and there were some townspeople here, and I don't remember who asked this, but the two gentlemen that were speaking on behalf of the DOT were asked how long that pavement was designed to last, and they said it was placed in 1987 with a maximum lifespan of 30 years. Right.
Oh, it's a little overdue.
Yeah, like by the time they replace it, 9 years overdue. I can't tell you why the state made the decision to leave it as long as they did. That's up to them, but they did that. They admitted that, and then stated that they couldn't do it faster than 26 just on engineering budgeting. But to their credit, the people kind of overseeing this part of the state on behalf of the DOT did come out and look at the road and said, yeah, because originally what the state had proposed was a 2-inch overlay over the pavement we have. Well, it's in terrible shape. This is terrible shape. 2 inches of fresh pavement on that base, with all those semis and all that traffic, it would have ripped right off of there within a couple of years. And the state told us if we touch a road, we won't touch it again for 8 years. So a couple of years later, we'd have been back where we started from and sitting there for a half a dozen more years. So we pushed them. They came out and looked and went, oh yeah, you guys are right. Thank you for that. And said, we get to you in 26, it's going to happen. It's budgeted, it's engineered. They'll do 2 lanes at a time, and you'll have traffic in 1 lane each way on one side while they're doing it, and it will be done in 26. I don't have a start date or a completion date other than in 26.
Okay, well, we just have to hang in there for another year.
Yeah, at least we have a date.
Yes. Well, you mentioned some better atmosphere in terms of city offices. Are there new employees? Are there new procedures? Are there new processes you'd like people to know about? I know one thing I'm very pleased to see is that you can now pay your utility bill online.
Right. See, things like that weren't the hardest decision to make, but they had to be made, and now they have been, and that points to a change maybe in cooperation, in culture, things like that. Just to look at what you've always done and say, okay, that's why we've done it this way because we've always done it this way, but should we change what we're doing? And there's been a lot of that. We have a zoning administrator now. The city hadn't had a full-time zoning administrator in years. Melinda Jones, when she was city clerk treasurer, took on zoning as well. God love Melinda for doing that, but they're two very different things. And honestly, that's too much to put on one person. That's a lot. Then we had Bill McCorkle, came out of retirement, worked very hard for us. Great guy, helped me so many ways, and stayed as long as he could, but he was working as a part-time zoning administrator into his early to mid-80s. Did a great job with what he had to work with and the time he had available until he retired. And now we have a full-time representative, Matt Williams, and he's helped a bunch. He's working very hard and helping the city quite a bit. Also, the Economic Development Office, we've been able to get, with the help of Tammy Baldwin and Derek Van Orden, and I think the people should know, bipartisan help, the city got a $2.5 million grant, which was intended to help get a new hospital built. That's on hold. I don't know from the hospital folks. I don't think they've decided when they'll take that up again. So we have to review that grant. A federal grant comes with pages and pages of restrictions and rules. It's not simple. You can't just tell somebody to open page 3 and tell me what to do. It just doesn't work like that. We're actually going to have a professional review of that grant. Because it will have an expiration date. It will have things you can and cannot do with it, things like that. I don't know, nobody knows when the hospital project will get a fresh look, when it will be completed and all of that. So what we've got to do is make sure that we take advantage of that resource, whatever the best use is for the city. We're not opposed to using it for a new hospital, but right now we don't have a new hospital project to use it on. So we're going to review everything to do with that grant to make sure we don't miss anything and make sure it gets used to the best interest of the future of the city. All of this stuff, what it really points to is a lot of the cooperative spirit. For the first time, maybe ever, I think ever, in the city's history, there is now a utility manager. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. When we were reviewing things with utilities, again in June and July, it made the news that we were going to have this public hearing and talk through what's going on and figure it out. And I never doubted we would, and we did. But it seemed like every direction I heard from said, you need a utility manager. Well, there'd been an ordinance passed some time ago by the city council many years ago saying that there should be. And they just hadn't done that. Well, there is now. And that's part of what's helped, is the utility manager meets every Monday morning with the director of public works, which is also a position that had been unfilled for years. That's the position Bill McCorkle initially retired from. So to save money, and I don't blame anybody, I get it, budgets are tough in a small town. Through the years, the city engineer position hadn't been filled, director of public works hadn't been filled, we didn't have a full-time zoning administrator. These things were because they're very expensive. We now have Jason Glassburner doing director of public works and still assisting with economic development. We have Matt Williams as a zoning administrator, and the utilities are funding a utility manager position. So that's a different funding source than property taxes. Okay, and Scott Gald is filling that role. Every Monday morning, the city administrator, the director of public works, and the utility manager sit and meet and talk. This was not happening because we didn't have these positions.
Nobody could.
We didn't have them.
Yeah.
They're not just meeting, they're working well together, and they're coming up with solutions. Those solutions get to me, I'm often in those meetings, or they come to me right after them. Then they get to the city finance committee, they get to the utility commission, the utility department heads. Everybody's got the input they need to have, the question and answer, and what's the way forward. And you're seeing results. For example, servers, the IT. So one for the city and one for utilities need to be replaced. Why are we buying two? Are we not representing the same people in the same building? Yes, we're buying one, and we're going to share it. How about that? Less money spent from all of us. Sounds simple, right? It took a lot of work to sort of get everybody on the page we're on now, but we are here, okay? And that's very important. It's going to take time and effort. Example of a server, it's just one example. You know, example of a sewer rate decrease, just one example. But those are the early returns on the work we've done. Who's to say what the next 5 years might bring? We're trying to get more, I guess, industrial, commercial. Remember that about 10 years ago, this community built a very expensive wastewater treatment plant down by the Twin Bluffs to move the one out of the city that was making things smell badly.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, but they did that. Now understand, if I use the term wet industries, so that means, for example, dairy processing that produces dairy waste. That's wastewater that has to be treated just like when you flush your toilet, only on much, much larger scale. Okay, that stuff is big and heavy and expensive, which is why Schreiber's and Foremost went together and built their own treatment plant. That's just an example. There are other similar industries in the area. Some of them we get business from, if you'll call it that, for our plant. We'd like to add more, because more of that means maybe we could charge less money to the residential users, maybe, depending on how things go. And our utility people deserve a lot of credit because they're working very hard to try to turn that page and get some of that. Don't have the final answer yet, but it's not, I mean, it's getting a real effort from several people to try to do that. Just looking for ways to not only contain costs, but not just for the city or utilities, which are very important, but always remember the 5,100 people that live here and the fact that they're paying for all of this stuff too. Because all of us, this is not a political statement, it's just reality. All of us got hit hard by inflation in the last few years. The first time in 40 years we really had to confront that. And when you realize how much more everything costs everybody, you have to take a fresh look. We are. Full commitment from everybody down here to do that.
Well, this spring, you mentioned, will be elections. It's not a mayor election time, but there will be some city council seats. It's a little early because it's not until April, but what do you anticipate? Do you think most people will run for the same
Yeah.
seats?
Great question. And it's very timely. This is a critical issue, actually. I'm not real happy about this right now. Every spring, regardless, every single spring, half of the city council seats, 4 of them, are up for election. So for election purposes, the city of Richland Center is split into 4 districts, just different neighborhoods. This is District 1, which is basically the Walmart area up to the, I guess it would be the south side of Hazeltine Street. District 2, north side of Hazeltine, the downtown, the hospital area, Valley View, Storyfield area, Central Avenue, Church Street area. That's District 2. District 3 kind of picks up there, cemetery area out to the fairgrounds, Allison Park, basically. And then District 4, Cairns Addition, West Side Drive, Panorama Estates coming in up to, it runs into District 3 kind of over by the park in that area. Okay, so 4 districts, and each district has 2 representatives, and each spring, 1 seat in each of the 4 is up, which means this April, 4 are up. Now the 4 incumbents who are up for re-election, District 1 is Karen Tepley, District 2 is Mark Chambers, District 3 is Melanie Walters, and District 4 is Steve Downs. 3 of them have grabbed nomination papers and are circulating them right now to run for re-election. Mark Chambers filed a declaration of non-candidacy. So one of the representatives in District 2 is not running. That means we do not have right now a candidate, because the process to run, you come to the city clerk's office, just bring your ID, I live in the city, I'm over 18, this is my address, I live in this district. They give you nomination papers, it's called polling papers, taking out nomination papers. You go circulate them in the neighborhood you live in, get the required number of signatures, they'll tell you all of that in that office, bring them back. The deadline to bring those back is January 7th, and as of right now, District 2 has no candidate,
Oh, that's
because
not good.
no one has come down here to take out papers. Now, we've already run into this at the county level. There have been county board seats that went unfilled at election time because nobody ran. That doesn't work, guys. The form of government this country has, which I would take over what I've seen anywhere else in the world, requires participation. You know, the government from the people. The key word was people. You got to get people to show up and do it, and to care enough to dig in and do the hard work. It shouldn't be this hard to get candidates.
What kind of commitment is it from people? Obviously, there's a meeting, there are committees.
Yep.
Roughly, if you're a city council person, how much time and effort does it take?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Now, it is a commitment, and don't let anybody tell you it's not. Now, the answer to how much time, we used to meet twice a month, and we now meet once a month. We cut that back, and what that did, some of the committees didn't meet every month, some only met once a month, but there were a few that met twice a month. That obviously put less meetings in there because there's less city council meetings. So it's not as much time as it had been, and how much time depends on how many committees you're on. Coming in new as a brand new older person, it depends on who it is. If somebody comes in here that's got experience with government or just very well qualified, the mayor does the committee appointments. Possibly they get placed on a handful of them. When I was elected, Mike Kaufman was mayor, and he put me on 5 committees right away and made me the chair of 1 on day 1. I went, whoa, I didn't know that was unique. But for most people, they don't start with a load that big. You know, 3 committees, something like that, just to kind of get you accustomed to how it all works and give you a chance to get your feet under you as when you're new. But the point is, I think people underestimate the significance of those 8 older persons. That is the policy setting body for the city. Those are the 8 people who vote on this, approving the city budget every year, on things like, do we enact this city ordinance or repeal or amend that one? Do we raise the fee for all of this? Do we get involved? Does the city spend money to try to attract this thing or that thing? That's the 8 older persons. The mayor only votes in a case of a tie vote, which so far in my time has not come up, but could. So those 8 people, hugely significant. They're spending $10 million a year of everybody's money. That's who votes on that, okay?
And it isn't volunteer work, they do get some
Yeah.
pay.
I mean, it's not, you don't do it for the money. You don't get enough money to say that's why I'm there, but we do, older persons are at $400 a month now. That was amended last year, it hadn't been touched since 1989, so we updated that. $400 a month to do it. But the point is, you're shaping the future of your town. Okay, you are shaping the future. What you do affects today, but what you're doing really affects the generations you will never meet. That's part of what the appeal was for me, is to grab something big in my hometown and go, you know what? The people that came before me, now I can remember in my memory going back to Mayor Laverne Hardy in the 70s through the mid 80s and then forward. I left town for a long time, but I've known almost every mayor that has served in my lifetime, somebody I knew personally. And I see the things that have come to town, and I know, because I'm in this chair, what the struggles were to get it done. Even when people complain that nothing happens here, oh yes it does. We got a dike put in my lifetime, which Darla Wentz, a lot of people deserve credit, but he's the mayor who put himself out there and got it. Without that, we couldn't have developed Orange Street, we couldn't have added Wedgewood, that was all floodplain. Without that, how many times have you seen neighboring communities flood, and we didn't? Because that dike is there. That's why we didn't flood the way those other towns have. Those were the 8 older persons voting yes or no to that. When you saw the dialysis center go in, again, 8 older persons, and in that case the redevelopment authority, 2 groups, yep, let's figure it out. We figured it out. And there's so many others around town. Different housing developments, different businesses coming in, just how we're going to pay the bills here so that we don't hamstring future generations. That is what 8 people get to decide all the time. Hugely impactful. Okay.
So this next week is kind of critical. If anyone out there is interested, they should stop by.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to amend what you said. You said kind of critical. Absolutely critical. Because here's the thing. We have 3 incumbents running, but someone could run in those districts too. There's nothing that said you shouldn't have multiple candidates, right? Isn't that really kind of the ideal? But whether or not that happens, we literally have no candidate in District 2. Which means if nobody's on the ballot, when you go to vote in April, somebody could get 2, 3, 5 votes and get elected to the city council. Whoever it is, it is. I don't think that's what you want. I mean, it doesn't sound right to me. It seems to me that the voters should choose, and without a choice on the ballot, they can't. They just sort of pick whoever said, hey, vote for me. I hope we get better than that, because I think our people deserve better than that. But for our people to get better than that, our people need to sign up and get themselves on the ballot. That's the only way it works, and that's the truth of where we are. Then that election will be held in April. If a primary is needed, if we ended up with 3 candidates, then we'd have a primary in February. Hasn't been one in years. The last one I remember was District 1, must have been around 2018. There were 3 candidates and they had a primary. I only remember one seat having 2 candidates in the whole time since. One time, which, that was also that was ironically District 2. We had 2 candidates a few years ago where we have none right now. Who knows? But anyway, it's to run for city council, or next year to run for mayor. You come down to the city clerk's office in the city building next door to Family Dollar, next door to the police station. Go in the clerk's office, tell them you want to run. They'll ask to see your ID. You'll tell them who you are. They'll have you sign the papers, give you what you need. It's not a complex process, but it's a very important one.
Well, talking a little bit about the future, I remember there was a group that discussed, this was in the 1980s, and they were looking ahead and thinking about Richland Center in the year 2000. It was going to be so far away. And they had a lot of ideas, but one thing they weren't planning on was the internet.
Oh.
There was no, people weren't aware of it. And so there can be surprises, there can be things that happen both wonderful and maybe not so wonderful that you hadn't anticipated. But I think it's kind of good if a city, a county, a place has a vision of what they'd like to be in the future, like you were talking about. And what if you could imagine 2050? What would you hope for Richland Center? You and I probably won't even be around anymore, but you can lay the groundwork.
And we need to. That's a great question, Dorothy. So looking at where we are, which is the starting point, and going to the future, you made a great point. I don't know what technologies will evolve or what challenges or whatever opportunities. I don't know that. But with the information we have, what I would say is it's very important, in my opinion, for Richland Center to always embrace the industries we have. We love you. Glad you're here. Never leave. We'll take care of you the best we can. But to look for something that's not here. Bring opportunities here. I mean career opportunities that we don't currently have. So I think of Verona. Their mayor some years back really put himself out there and said, let's go get Epic. Fitchburg had him. They should have had him. They chose not to approve the financing package it would have taken to get him. And Verona really took a chance. Verona was a much different place than it is now. Smaller, struggling to pay the bills, things people don't envision now, but it was true then. And he said, I think we can get him, and they approved a huge financing package. It was risky. I might have the numbers wrong. But if I do, I'm close and I can make the point. I believe he said the tax incremental financing package they approved was about $18 million, and I believe he said the last year he was mayor, they paid them $22 million in property taxes in 1 year. So yeah, they had to do, oh man, they had to do their homework. They had to do a lot of work. They took a lot of criticism because you don't know the outcome. You planned and you did everything the best you could. But, that's going to bring fear. Because when you do a package that big, if it doesn't go well, right, this is not okay. But for them, it changed Verona forever. One example, and this is the counties to do, not the cities, and I'm not leading anybody, I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm giving an example that I can think of. The campus property. Near and dear to your heart for the rest of your days.
Yes.
As it should be. One thing I know, neither the county nor the city can afford to leave it dormant. We just can't.
No.
We can't. So what you have is actually a wonderful property right off the highway with turning lanes in place. All this stuff, city utilities is there. All this stuff that we talk about how expensive it is, it's there. Now we've got the big problem of, oh my goodness, these buildings, what do we do? I don't know. The county's trying to figure that out, and God love them. They didn't ask for this. But that property, what if we could recruit? I'm just saying Epic because it's the one I know.
Or something like that.
Yeah, something that's not here.
Robotics.
It's sure. And what if it was something?
AI.
Absolutely. And what if it was an industry that just maybe, pays better than the average job here does now and is in a completely different field. So we're not pulling labor away from what we have. We're adding opportunities which will bring young people here to work there, to do those things, to raise their kids here, which in turn, of course, helps the school district, which doing that helps the taxpayers because more state aid comes to the schools. Less money has to come from everybody living here, which in turn gives more participants into the tax base for the city and the county, which maybe lowers the next time they have to raise property taxes or prevents it, or prevents a service cut you would have hit someday because the tax base didn't grow to keep up with inflation. That property, there's a lot of sorting out to do, but I see it as a wonderful opportunity that I never wanted. I wish the campus was still here and thriving, and there's a lot to say about that, justifiably so. But we are where we are. The decisions have been made, and we can't afford not to do something out there. And I look at, I've told you in this show, the challenge of buildable land, the challenge of that's floodplain and that's too hilly, and how much it costs to put in city utilities and maybe a street, and then I look at that property and go, checked every one of those boxes. We just got to figure it out, and the emotions are going to stay sharp, and that's okay. That's okay. There's a reason for that. I mean, I went to that campus. 10 of my family members went to that campus. I get it.
Well, and I think many people who are like my age remember what happened to the teachers' college.
For sure.
And you certainly don't want that, because that was in my neighborhood, an abandoned building that was empty for decades and had a fire and was dangerous. And no, you need something there.
That building stood there for 20 years after that fire.
Yeah.
That building burned in the spring 1977 in March. I can still see it. I was in 4th grade, and Dale Schmidt, Doris's son, Dale, Mark's older brother, was a crossing guard at Jefferson Elementary. And we were all running to the bus to be the first one on the bus to get the front seat. And Dale said, "Look," in the black smoke. In 1977, I'm going to say in March, my mother was a teacher's aide working in that building. She helped walk all those kids to Lincoln Elementary. Everybody got out because it was more smoke than anything, as electrical fire. That's I believe that building was there 20 years. I'm sure
It
of
was
it.
there a long time, and it was just abandoned.
Just this boarded up eyesore that was producing nothing, tying up most of a block. You can't do that in a small town. You can't do that. You can't let that happen. So the campus obviously encompasses a much larger property.
Yes.
What that means for all of the frustration and all of the emotion that is justified over what's happened with our campus, if we can get ourselves through the emotion, that is now a phenomenal opportunity that we've got to access. And what I'd like to see for the future of Richland Center and Richland County, something recruited onto that space that's not here now, that produces jobs that are not here now in a different industry, so that we don't impact what we do have in a negative way, but we bring opportunities we didn't have, which are going to attract people that will need to live here to work here, and that grows the population. And that's why we can't look away from housing, because if you can't grow without a place to live, we have that opportunity. We just have to access it and figure out the best way to utilize that property. And the city's open to assisting the county in any way that we can, but understand, people, that that is a county property that exists within the city, which makes it unique. The county has to decide what they want to do, and then whenever they know, they'll bring their plan to the city plan commission, the city council, and so forth like that. I see that as a way ahead. A lot of people probably don't view Richland Center this way. One thing COVID taught myself and a lot of us down here, for a town of our size, we actually have a fairly robust economy. And what I mean by that is when COVID caused so many businesses to close. If you owned a retail establishment, that was really tough. Hair salons and restaurants and all of these places, it was not easy at all. But our largest employers, do you realize how much health care there is here? Multiple nursing homes, a hospital, a dialysis center, memory care. For a town of our size, there's a lot of it. More than I think you would expect. And then the other thing, all the food processing. Wow. Between Schreiber, Foremost, Elcam, all of that. And then Rockwell was declared an essential business too because of what they make there. So our biggest employers never closed. I never thought about that until that time. So in other words, great foundation. But to grow to something we're not, we're going to have to add to that foundation. And it doesn't make sense to target what was already here when you're looking for growth. Go find something that would be new, that's going to bring new opportunities and more people. And I would hope that the people who follow me into this chair and come and work or get elected for the city and the county would have that vision of, when you see a place you can build, you have to be aggressive, because we will always struggle with that based on our geography and our topography. So when you see it, go get it. And when you go get it, go find things that aren't here yet. Because,
Excellent thought, and we, of course, wish the city and all of the residents a wonderful 2025, and we thank you for sharing your perspective with us.
Thanks for coming down. Love doing this every year. Thank you to the voters for keeping me here. Happy New Year, everybody.
Well, Happy New Year, and thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll come back every week to watch our town.